Motivational Brown Girls, and you are listening to Sipping Tea with M.B.G. on this great day of January 6, 2018, and Happy New Year to everybody and to everyone. I hope everyone was able to leave the foolishness that they might have went through in 2017 and dropped it off and was free when it came into 2018. And I'm so glad that you are here listening to us. You're listening to me right now, just giving you a little introduction as to what to look for the month of January. Motivational Brown Girls has decided to make January Mental Health Month for M.B.G. And what that means is if you've been listening to us and watching our shows, throughout last year in 2017, we have been hitting mental health here and there, and just talking briefly about how it's a silent killer, especially in the African-American community, because we talk, if somebody is a little special or a little crazy, they go off in the room. You don't really talk about it. And the misconception of how you have a serial killer that's white, they may have be classified as, he has some mental health issues, but if it was somebody black, same thing, or they're a criminal. So we just kind of just hit points here and there, but we decided to really get deep into it for the month of January. And what inspired this was because the Instagram post of Tyrese went on a tangent in 2017. He took to Instagram a video and started crying and was fussing and complaining and going all out about a situation in regards to child support and his child. And then it came out later that none of the stuff he was saying was true. He ended up having shared custody, things of that nature. And then he also revealed that he had a breakdown because of the psychotropic meds that he was on, and it was just a lot of back and forth, and it seemed like, it was a cry for help, but at the same time, maybe it was for attention. So we started thinking, are people really out here attention-seeking with mental health, or they really do have mental health issues? And sometimes people who have mental health issues and know that can be manipulative depending on what's going on in their life. And then you have those who are actually just manipulative, period, and will put on a front, or as in psychology they would call lingering. So that's just different points that we're going to take throughout this month, and it's really going to be a heavy topic. And of course, throughout the month, we're going to hit different personality disorders like bipolar, schizophrenia, histrionic, borderline, compare and contrast, and just get deep and down into it. And while you're listening, you might be like, I know somebody like that. Well, hell, I have those traits too. But we're not here to diagnose anybody. We're just here here to talk about what is prevalent in our communities, what we see day to day, but don't know how to address it. Like I said before, we classify this as one of the silent killers. Mental health is rarely talked about, and it needs to be talked about. So just giving you an overview. And of course, last year, we talked about so many things on our TV show and on our podcast, and we hope you all tuned in. And we may go back to those topics later on this year and just bring a new perspective, a fresh perspective on what we talked about before. And I'm just looking forward to what we have in store for you guys that's checking in. Also, for those that are in the Virginia area, I just want to remind you that our General Assembly is getting ready to go in session on January 10th. And what that means is that that's local, it's not national. So that means your delegates for your areas, your representative for your areas is getting ready to go into session and bring up bills for Virginia that may or may not benefit you. And once again, as we always say, hold your people accountable and find out who actually represents you and actually what's going on in your community. If there's a lack of jobs, you have a delegate that needs to know that, and they need to present that to the General Assembly so they can have open more jobs, present more jobs for people in your area so they can live. That's just some of the things that we're going to talk about. Of course, M.B.G. is here to educate, inform, and motivate for you all to be agents of change. So again, for January, it's going to be mental health for us, and we're going to dive into this thing. It may get deep, it may open some sores, but it's all good for the process of healing. But again, it's something that needs to be addressed. You can't heal without addressing the situation. Again, this is M.B.G with Motivational Brown Girls. Thank you all for checking in. And as always, M.B.G listens, and then we speak.
Don't worry, don't cry. That's a voice I hear inside, but it's hard for me to see. Tomorrow's but a dream, 'cause today's reality is right in front of me. They say I'll never make it. They say you can never change it. What you are is what you'll always be. They say that I should give up. Once you're down, you'll never get up. But that's not the truth for me. No, who the sun sets free, best believe it's free indeed. Gonna take it to the streets. My Lord delivered me. Who the sun sets free, best believe it's free indeed. Gonna dance and shout and scream. I'm free. Tried and tried and tried to make this mountain step aside, or to climb it on my own. What you did was more than help. Did what I couldn't do myself. You said that I was not alone. When I thought I'd never make it, you came along and then you changed it. Made a way somehow and brought me through. As I was just about to give up, you took my hand, so baby, get up. Now here I stand because of you. Stand because of you. The sun sets free. Best believe it's free indeed. Gonna take it to the streets. My Lord delivered me. The sun sets free. Best believe it's free indeed. Gonna dance and shout and scream. I'm free.
So I'm a woman with chronic schizophrenia. I've spent hundreds of days in psychiatric hospitals. I might have ended up spending most of my life on the back ward of a hospital, but that isn't how my life turned out. In fact, I've managed to stay clear of hospitals for almost 3 decades, perhaps my proudest accomplishment. That's not to say that I've remained clear of all psychiatric struggles. After I graduated from the Yale Law School and got my first law job, my New Haven analyst, Dr. White, announced to me that he was going to close his practice in 3 months, several years before I had planned to leave New Haven. White had been enormously helpful to me, and the thought of his leaving shattered me. My best friend, Steve, sensing that something was terribly wrong, flew out to New Haven to be with me. Now I'm going to quote from some of my writings. I opened the door to my studio apartment. Steve would later tell me that for all the times he had seen me psychotic, nothing could have prepared him for what he saw that day. For a week or more, I had barely eaten. I was gaunt. I walked as though my legs were wooden. My face looked and felt like a mask. I had closed all the curtains in the apartment, so in the middle of the day, the apartment was in near total darkness. The air was fetid, the room a shambles. Steve, both a lawyer and a psychologist, has treated many patients with severe mental illness, and to this day he'll say I was as bad as any he had ever seen. Hi, I said, and then I returned to the couch where I sat in silence for several moments. Thank you for coming, Steve. Crumbling world, word, voice. Tell the clocks to stop. Time has come. White is leaving, Steve said somberly. I'm being pushed into a grave. The situation is grave, I moan. Gravity is pulling me down. I'm scared. Tell them to get away. As a young woman, I was in a psychiatric hospital on 3 different occasions for lengthy periods. My doctors diagnosed me with chronic schizophrenia and gave me a prognosis of, quote, grave. That is, at best, I was expected to live in a board and care and work at menial jobs. Fortunately, I did not actually enact that grave prognosis. Instead, I'm a chaired professor of law, psychology, and psychiatry at the USC Gould School of Law. I have many close friends, and I have a beloved husband, Will, who's here with us today. Thank you. He's definitely the star of my show. I'd like to share with you how that happened and also describe my experience of being psychotic. I hasten to add that it's my experience because everyone becomes psychotic in his or her own way. Let's start with the definition of schizophrenia. Schizophrenia is a brain disease. Its defining feature is psychosis or being out of touch with reality. Delusions and hallucinations are hallmarks of the illness. Delusions are fixed and false beliefs that aren't responsive to evidence, and hallucinations are false sensory experiences. For example, when I'm a psychotic, I often have the delusion that I've killed hundreds of thousands of people with my thoughts. I sometimes have the idea that nuclear explosions are about to be set off in my brain. Occasionally I have hallucinations, like one time I turned around and saw a man with a raised knife. Imagine having a nightmare while you're awake. Often, speech and thinking become disorganized to the point of incoherence. Loose associations involves putting together words that may sound a lot alike but don't make sense. And if the words get jumbled up enough, it's called word salad. Contrary to what many people think, schizophrenia is not the same as multiple personality disorder or split personality. The schizophrenic mind is not split, but shattered. Everyone has seen a street person, unkempt, probably ill-fed, standing outside of an office building, muttering to himself or shouting. This person is likely to have some form of schizophrenia. But schizophrenia presents itself across a wide array of socioeconomic status, and there are people with the illness who are full-time professionals with major responsibilities. Several years ago, I decided to write down my experiences and my personal journey, and I want to share some more of that story with you today to convey the inside view. So the following episode happened the 7th week of my first semester of my first year at Yale Law School, quoting from my writings. My 2 classmates, Rebel and Val, and I, had made the date to meet in the law school library on Friday night to work on our memo assignment together. But we didn't get far before I was talking in ways that made no sense. Memos are visitations, I informed them. They make certain points. The point is on your head. Pat used to say that. Have you killed anyone? Rebel and Val looked at me as if they or I had been splashed in the face with cold water. What are you talking about, Ellen? Oh, you know, the usual, who's what, what's who, heaven and hell. Let's go out on the roof. It's a flat surface. It's safe. Rebel and Val followed, and they asked what had gotten into me. This is the real me, I announced, waving my arms above my head. And then, late on a Friday night, on the roof of the Yale Law School, I began to sing, and not quietly either. Come to the Florida sunshine bush. Do you want to dance? Are you on drugs, one asked. Are you high? Hi, me? No way, no drugs. Come to the Florida sunshine bush, where there are lemons, where they make demons. You're frightening me, one of them said, and Rebel and Val headed back into the library. I shrugged and followed them. Back inside, I asked my classmates if they were having the same experience of words jumping around our cases as I was. I think someone's infiltrated my copies of the cases I've said. We've got to case the joint. I don't believe in joints, but they do hold your body together. It's an example of loose associations. Eventually, I made my way back to my dorm room. And once there, I couldn't settle down. My head was too full of noise, too full of orange trees and law memos I could not write and mass murders I knew I would be responsible for. Sitting on my bed, I rocked back and forth, moaning in fear and isolation. This episode led to my first hospitalization in America. I had 2 earlier in England, continuing with the writings. The next morning, I went to my professor's office to ask for an extension on the memo assignment, and I began gibbering unintelligibly as I had the night before, and he eventually brought me to the emergency room. Once there, someone I'll just call the doctor and his whole team of goons swooped down, lifted me high into the air, and slammed me down on a metal bed with such force that I saw stars. Then they strapped my legs and arms to the metal bed with thick leather straps. A sound came out of my mouth that I'd never heard before. Half groan, half scream, barely human, and pure terror. Then the sound came again, forced from somewhere deep inside my belly and scraping my throat raw. This incident resulted in my involuntary hospitalization. One of the reasons the doctors gave for hospitalizing me against my will was that I was, quote, gravely disabled. To support this view, they wrote in my chart that I was unable to do my Yale Law School homework. I wondered what that meant about much of the rest of New Haven. During the next year, I would spend 5 months in a psychiatric hospital. At times, I spent up to 20 hours in mechanical restraints. Arms and legs tied down with a net tied tightly across my chest. I never struck anyone, I never harmed anyone, I never made any direct threats. If you've never been restrained yourself, you may have a benign image of the experience. There's nothing benign about it. Every week in the United States, it's been estimated that 1 to 3 people die in restraints. They strangle, they aspirate their vomit, they suffocate, they have a heart attack. It's unclear whether using mechanical restraints is actually saving lives or costing lives. While I was preparing to write my student note for the Yale Law Journal on mechanical restraints, I consulted an eminent law professor who was also a psychiatrist and said surely he would agree that restraints must be degrading, painful, and frightening. He looked at me in a knowing way and said, "Ellen, you don't really understand. These people are psychotic. They're different from me and you. They wouldn't experience restraints as we would." I didn't have the courage to tell him in that moment that no, we're not that different from him. We don't like to be strapped down to a bed and left to suffer for hours any more than he would. In fact, until very recently, and I'm sure some people still hold it, is the view that restraints help psychiatric patients feel safe. I've never met a psychiatric patient who agreed with that view. Today, I like to say I'm very pro-psychiatry, but very anti-force. I don't think force is effective as treatment. And I think using force is a terrible thing to do to another person with a terrible illness. Eventually, I came to Los Angeles to teach at the University of Southern California Law School. For years, I had resisted medication, making many, many efforts to get off. I felt that if I could manage without medication, I could prove that, after all, I wasn't really mentally ill. It was some terrible mistake. My motto was the less medicine, the less effective. My LA analyst, Dr. Kaplan, was urging me just to stay on medication and get on with my life, but I decided I wanted to make one last college try to get off, quoting from the text. I started the reduction of my meds, and within a short time, I began feeling the effects. After returning from a trip to Oxford, I marched into Kaplan's office, headed straight for the corner, crouched down, covered my face, and began shaking. All around me, I sensed evil beings poised with daggers. They'd slice me up in thin slices or make me swallow hot coals. Kaplan would later describe me as, quote, writhing in agony. Even in this state, what he accurately described as acutely and floridly psychotic, I refused to take more medication. The mission is not yet complete. Immediately after the appointment with Kaplan, I went to see Dr. Martyr, a schizophrenia expert who was following me for medication side effects. He was under the impression that I had a mild psychotic illness. Once in his office, I sat on his couch, folded over, and began muttering. Head explosions and people trying to kill. Is it okay if I totally trash your office? You need to leave if you think you're going to do that, said Martyr. Okay, small, fire on ice. Tell them not to kill me. Tell them not to kill me. What have I done wrong? Hundreds of thousands with thoughts, interdiction. Ellen, do you feel like you're dangerous to yourself or others? I think you need to be in the hospital. I could get you admitted right away and the whole thing could be very discreet. Ha, ha, ha. You're offering to put me in hospitals? Hospitals are bad, they're mad, they're sad. One must stay away. I'm God, or I used to be. At that point in the text where I said, I'm God, or I used to be, my husband made a marginal note. He said, did you quit or were you fired? I give life and I take it away. Forgive me, for I know not what I do. Eventually, I broke down in front of friends, and everybody convinced me to take more medication. I could no longer deny the truth, and I could not change it. The wall that kept me, Ellen, Professor Sykes, separate from that insane woman hospitalized years past, lay smashed and in ruins. Everything about this illness says I shouldn't be here, but I am. And I am, I think, for 3 reasons. First, I've had excellent treatment. 4 to 5 day a week psychoanalytic psychotherapy for decades and continuing, and excellent psychopharmacology. Second, I have many close family members and friends who know me and know my illness. These relationships have given my life a meaning and a depth, and they also help me navigate my life in the face of symptoms. Third, I work at an enormously supportive workplace at USC Law School. This is a place that not only accommodates my needs, but actually embraces them. It's also a very intellectually stimulating place, and occupying my mind with complex problems has been my best and most powerful and most reliable defense against my mental illness. Even with all that, excellent treatment, wonderful family and friends, supportive work environment, I did not make my illness public until relatively late in life. And that's because the stigma against mental illness is so powerful that I didn't feel safe with people knowing. If you hear nothing else today, please hear this. There are not schizophrenics. There are people with schizophrenia. And these people may be your spouse, they may be your child, they may be your neighbor, they may be your friend, they may be your coworker. So let me share some final thoughts. We need to invest more resources into research and treatment of mental illness. The better we understand these illnesses, the better the treatments we can provide. And the better the treatments we can provide, the more we can offer people care and not have to use force. Also, we must stop criminalizing mental illness. It's a national tragedy and scandal that the LA County Jail is the biggest psychiatric facility in the United States. American prisons and jails are filled with people who suffer from severe mental illness, and many of them are there because they never received adequate treatment. I could have easily ended up there or on the streets myself. A message to the entertainment industry and to the press. On the whole, you've done a wonderful job fighting stigma and prejudice of many kinds. Please continue to let us see characters in your movies, your plays, your columns who suffer with severe mental illness. Portray them sympathetically and portray them in all the richness and depth of their experience as people and not as diagnoses. Recently, a friend posed a question. If there were a pill I could take that would instantly cure me, would I take it? The poet Rainer Maria Rilke was offered psychoanalysis. He declined, saying, don't take my devils away because my angels may flee too. My psychosis, on the other hand, is a waking nightmare in which my devils are so terrifying that all my angels have already fled. So would I take the pill in an instant? That said, I don't wish to be seen as regretting the life I could have had if I'd not been mentally ill, nor am I asking anyone for their pity. What I rather wish to say is that the humanity we all share is more important than the mental illness we may not. What those of us who suffer with mental illness want is what everybody wants. In the words of Sigmund Freud, to work and to love. Thank you.
In my 16th year, it became apparent to me that the story I will be writing for the rest of my life would be the manic depressive story. In my 15th year, I was diagnosed and going stark mad, and by my 17th, I realized that both of the above statements would be totally irrelevant to the life I would be living today. So, hello, most of you know me, but my name is Katie G. I am a senior, I am 17 years old, and I love writing and cats a lot. I dance and belt out to Taylor Swift on Fridays. It's kind of this accidental tradition between me and my friends. And I'm not very good at being cool, regardless if I'm talking to one person, let alone a room full of people at TEDx. I am also a survivor of mental illness. This is a story of courage. Everything changes when you get to high school. When the stakes get higher and the cards are decked up against you, it's easy to feel lost. I felt like the world was shifting beneath my feet, and I was the only one standing still. Everyone else around me was running towards this vague, ambiguous finish line called the future. They had already gotten a head start on me. Early on, I struggled with suicidal thoughts and self-harm. I looked for solace in so many things: religiousness, rejecting religion, French philosophy, sports. I couldn't find it. But I made my way to a normal, and that's what mattered, right? It's not like any of those things could happen again. I'm wrong. It's scientifically proven that things change in adolescence. I mean, puberty. Half of all lifetime cases of mental illness start at age 14. 4 million children and adolescents suffer from a diagnosable mental illness, but depression makes up the most of it. And we know depression all too well in this community. After all, there was Jackie. There were the infamous Palo Alto suicides of 2009 and 2010. I hate how they're all lumped together. The Palo Alto suicides, it leaves a bad taste in my mouth. Meanwhile, I'm just a teenage girl lost in a sea of statistics. Around the time I ended my freshman year, I fell apart yet again. It was quietly. Somehow, some way, I knew I was broken and I wanted to crazy glue this crazy mess back together. I mean, if I could do it once, heck, I could do it again. I never really fixed myself, though. I didn't accept myself. I didn't accept the demons I faced. I knew how to deal, but I didn't know how to live. I struggled with a lot of anxiety. You know, the usual, the pre-college, pre-graduate school, pre-life is happening anxiety that comes with this midlife crisis. Anxiety isn't uncommon in environments like our own. In a recent PhD study on high-pressure college preparatory schools, it was found that 84.6 students reported that homework had a major effect on their stress level. Personal drive, 65.5. College goals, 57.7, and the expectations of their parents was 51.1%. I don't have much to say about this, other than I don't think it should really be shocking. Our own Honors Council surveys have found that that the pressure to cheat is driven by the pressure to do well in this rigorous environment. We, as the Harker community, have an unfortunately high stress level. And I want to say that my parents' expectations didn't influence me, but they did, or rather, what I thought their expectations were. My mother is an immigrant from the Philippines. She made it through the death of her father at 16, practically raised the majority of her 8 other siblings, and put herself through business school. My father is a first-generation, proud, Sacramento-born man who put himself through engineering school across the country, and they met at business school. Did I mention that business school's name was Harvard? When you have high-achieving parents who have high-profile jobs and everything is up in the skies for you, you have no choice but to shoot for the stars. And it gets worse when you go to a school where everybody is so amazing at what they do, creating phone apps left and right, going to great schools, winning contests and scholarships. You feel this collective pressure on your back, this overwhelming fear that you're not good enough, that you'll never be good enough. I was diagnosed with anxiety ending my freshman year. I was scared of my diagnosis, and I was scared of myself. This would be the beginning of a long relationship of being absolutely terrified of the person I was, the illness I was. Eventually, my family came to the conclusion that it was something more than anxiety. There was something in the red-eyed, wet face I'd return with from the bathroom to the restaurant table before the main course was served. There was something in the way I couldn't get myself out of bed, or the days when I'd lock myself in my room, scribbling furiously in a notebook because I had so many great, splendiferous ideas. Bipolar 2 is a unique illness characterized by mood swings that shift in between hypomania and depression. Hypomania is an elated feeling of euphoria and hyperactivity. Meanwhile, major depressive episodes in bipolar are generally much more severe than your typical unipolar depressed patient. At least 25 to 50% of bipolar patients will attempt suicide at least once. Being bipolar or manic depressive is scary. I was a person I didn't know, and when you're a teenager and you don't even know who you are, I was either hypomanic or depressed. And in the time in between, I was just confused. I was never Katie. I was just sick. So we went to the doctor again, and added onto the diagnosis was unipolar depression. I was put on Zoloft, but the diagnosis was wrong, and life just got worse. When someone who is bipolar is put on antidepressants, they flip a person, triggering a hypomanic or manic episode. The process is sped up. As they fall out of hypomania, they spiral into a depression, and that is exactly what happened to me. It made my curves grander. My highs got higher and my lows got lower, and I wondered if something was wrong with me, if it were my hormones, if there was something wrong in the way I was living, or even if my parents had done something wrong in raising me. Maybe I was the problem. I didn't really know what was going on, and neither did anybody else, really. The lack of education around mental illness is one that astounds me. 21% of children and adolescents suffer from a mental or addictive disorder, and it kills me that no one will talk about this. When a child is diagnosed with mental illness, the parents are ashamed. My parents were no better. We were all victims to the stigma around mental illness. And that's a common misconception, by the way, that having a mental illness or struggling with mental health means something is wrong with you. And the child is embarrassed. I mean, I was too. I felt so lonely. I was hungry for answers, but mostly I need someone to talk to. The mental illness community doesn't have a designated meeting time at long lunch. It doesn't have a classroom or a place of worship. It's a scavenger hunt in a way. People are so ashamed to talk about this that you only discover it when you're incredibly close to them. I felt like I had nobody. We should all have someone to talk to. We're all affected by mental health, but somehow society has attached the stigma to mental illness. I was embarrassed for being so messed up, and I didn't want to be a burden on anyone else. The moment I told my then friends what I was, who I was, that's what they made me believe I was, a burden. I was bullied for being bipolar and being crazy and having anxiety. My friends called me a crazy bitch behind my back, and through Facebook messages, actually. They laughed that I took medication, and in one particular incident, claimed I ruined the party by having a breakdown in the bathroom. I cannot stress the importance of having friends who understand what you're going through, or can at least empathize with you, especially when you're going through something like this, or even when you're going through the ordeal of life in general. I don't know how I'd be able to survive my senior year, the hectic and crazy year as it is, if it weren't for my friends. If children are bullying their friends for mental illness, who can say where this stigma will end? Being attacked for my mental illness during my sophomore year was absolutely traumatic. Again, I felt lonely. I felt like I had no one to talk to. But somehow, my sophomore year wasn't over yet. I was heavily medicated with lithium at this point. It was the right medication for bipolar disorder, but not the right medication for me. It truly was an effective mood stabilizer. I lost the lows, but I also lost the highs. I was numbed. I felt nothing. And in addition, lithium deeply impaired my ability to think. Medication casted a heavy fog over my life, and I wanted out. The summer of 2014 was my Indian summer. I will remember it today as one of the best memories I have and will cherish. Attending Brown's pre-college program in Rhode Island, I took classes that I was generally interested in. I made friends in my dorm and in my classes, and there are people today whom I can trust the world with. And I am so fortunate to have met all of these people and learned so many things. But it was that very same summer my confidence trumped my rationality. That's what it was, really. Being very confident. I felt like I had grown out of my medications. Like I could fight these demons on my own, because it was a matter of my brain chemistry. It was just me. Screw the armor. Screw the cavalry. Forget the horses. I could do this on my own. So, without my doctor's approval, I went off my medications and I suffered an episode of extreme hypomania followed by a severe depression. Hypomania is not easily described. It is the feeling of stars washing over your toes and galaxies dancing upon your fingertips. Depression is hopeless and helpless, confused and dangerous. It was natural to fall the way I did, to slip backwards into an addiction to hypomania. And in spite of this pandemonium, I wrote. I cannot stress the importance of adhering to your passions and chasing your dreams. It sounds so cheesy and angsty, but I wrote pages and pages of my story. It was writing that would help save me. Yes, it would be my family, my true friends, and my passions that would give me solace, but at the end of the day, it would be me, the stranger whose body I'd been living in for over 10 years, the person I would learn to love, who would give me strength, who would save me. In the months as I went back on medication, I still suffered a heavy depression. That's the thing about being treated for mental illness. It's not an exact science. They can put you on the pills. They can slow your heart rate down. They can get rid of those racing thoughts at night, but they will never be able to erase the memories. They will never be able to get rid of the faces of the demons you faced the night before. So at this point, I had two choices, the hospital or this aftercare program. I chose the latter, definitively telling myself I wasn't that bad. But as I attended the program, I met others who had struggled as I did, and I finally realized how sucky my situation was. I finally understood that it's okay to be sick, even if your illness is one that you fight on the inside. It was there that I found a more suitable medication plan, and the program helped my family as well. My parents never for a day forgot to love their child. They never hated me. They hated who I was becoming, this person consumed by her illness. My mother hated how I would lie in bed, hoping that the next breath I took would be my last. My father hated how he couldn't solve the equation as to what was wrong with me. They hated the illness. They hated that I was becoming the illness. I was off the lithium, but I still couldn't think straight. I could never stay in one place for long periods of time, but now I couldn't even read long passages. I was diagnosed and treated for ADHD. After seeking treatment, I witnessed tremendous results. But like my conceptions around mental illness, my thoughts on learning disabilities were seriously narrow-minded. I always assumed that ADHD is something for hyperactive little boys who watch too much reality television and play too many video games. It's difficult for girls to be diagnosed with ADHD, and it's estimated that half to three-fourths of all women with ADHD, or approximately 4 million women, go undiagnosed with it. While boys are hyperactive and impulsive, girls are disorganized. They are scattered and introverted. For me, it caused a lot of anxiety and depression. In a school full of geniuses, I genuinely felt stupid. I could barely remember to bring my TI calculator or bring my homework to class. So, if you take anything from this talk, let it be this. It's okay to not be okay. That could be embroidered on a pillow, or perhaps caption an overexposed picture on Instagram of the beach. But really, mental illness is not a weakness. The tenacity you form in the fires of going through something like this, it's unique. The struggles are a part of what makes us us, but know that it isn't everything. It's how we overcome them. Know that you are never alone in this fight, because I assure you, you are not the only one. As lonely and cold as the world may seem at times, there is a big enough hope for all of us. Don't be afraid to talk to someone, or to reach out, or to get help, because it's so important to chase your passions down that long, winding road called life. Today, the story I write will no longer be the manic-depressive story. For I am not my illness. I am not my struggles. I am an individual with a name, a story, passions, a history, and a personality. Staying myself was part of the battle, and I have declared war. The story I write today, and for the rest of my life, will be the story of me. Thank you.
Coming up for air, nobody even cares. Even though I thrash around, it seems I'm invisible. Coming up for air, nobody even cares. Even though I thrash around, it seems I'm invisible. Coming up for air, nobody even cares. Even though I thrash around, it seems I'm invisible.
Hey, guys, and definitely hope everyone is having a happy new year. This month of January is going to be awesome. M.B.G definitely did a great job, introducing January 2018 and what Sipping Tea with M.B.G is going to be about. And I just think that we really need to sit back and really reflect upon the things that we saw growing up. We need to reflect upon our relatives. We need to reflect upon so many different things, because this is where we are. Where we are is that mental health is really impacting our communities, it's impacting our schools, it's impacting our homes, our children. Hell, you see what the mental health is doing in the White House. And so I think that where we are is that with Sipping Tea with M.B.G this month, mental health awareness is important. So this segment is going to be called Brain Buster 101. And each week, like M.B.G said, you're going to definitely learn something new about mental health disorders. We're living in perilous times. And one of the major things that we have to think about is how mental health awareness will impact and influence how we begin to work in our communities, dissect various situations in our communities and things of that nature. When we're talking about mental health, I think one of the major things that we have to make sure that we kind of hone in on, we have to hone in on addictions. We have to make sure that we definitely address addictions, because, my personal opinion is this. My personal opinion is that we have a lot of people who are walking around like everything is okay, because historically, particularly in the African-American community, it is not acceptable, or it's not accepted for you to have certain issues. When you have certain issues, people don't want to talk about it. Back in the day, when someone in your family had an issue, what did they do? Well, they sent them away. You always had that one relative. Well, hey, where's Uncle such and such? Oh, he moved, or he's sick. No, he's not. Yeah, he's sick. He's mentally ill. But it's just we don't talk about it. And mental health, comes in the form of depression, anxiety, bipolar disorder, eating disorders, post-traumatic stress. And that's something that is significant, because we always think about PTSD in relationships with veterans. But you need to understand that PTSD can come from any traumatic experience, guys, anything. And your trauma is your trauma. Something that may be traumatic for you may not be traumatic for me. So as we talk about, mental health diagnosis and mental health disorders, we're going to cover a myriad of disorders. We're going to talk about bipolar personality disorder, which most people are familiar with. We are going to talk about histrionic personality disorder, and that's one of the disorders that a lot of time you really don't hear a lot about, but a lot of people are walking around here and are histrionic. We're going to talk about borderline personality disorder, schizophrenia, Munchausen syndrome, narcissists. And when we talk about narcissism, y'all know we're going to talk about your president. It's just so much. It's so much. And I think that where we are is that we really have to begin to try to figure out how we're going to combat these things and how we're going to make sure that these disorders aren't continuing to impact generations and generations and generations to come. Because right now, we're working with, me personally, I'm working with children who have disorders. Now, sometimes you can have a intellectual disability. You can have physical disabilities. You can have all types of disabilities. But when you have an intellectual or cognitive disability and you have a mental health diagnosis, it's tough. It's tough, and you need people to support you. One of the major things that we want to do, in this first week is to make sure that you understand that mental illness references a wide range of mental health conditions, okay? And mental health diagnoses, mental health disorders, those are the things that affect your mood, your thinking, and your behavior. Now, I don't mean any harm, but you have to understand something. If you are always sad or down or confused, that's a sign and symptom of mental health disorder, okay? If you have extreme mood changes, that's a sign of some sort of mental health disorder. Detachment from reality. If you're living in a false world and you thinking that this is this and that is that and it's really not even in existence, something's wrong. If you get to the point that you can't cope with daily problems or stress, something is wrong. And the biggest thing that you have to understand is you have to prepare yourself to seek help for these things. And so what we want to do in this, Brain Buster 101 segment of Sipping Tea with M.B.G., we want to shine light on mental illness, okay? We want you to understand that it's okay to go to your primary care provider and talk to them about how you're feeling. Because this is what you have to understand. Sometimes symptoms of mental health disorder appear as physical problems, like, oh, my stomach ache, oh, my back ache, oh, I got a headache. A whole lot of y'all that think y'all got migraines, y'all suffering from some mental health disorders and you don't even know it. What I'm finding is that a lot of individuals who are having migraines, if they get some of their green herbal, they feel fine. If they get a shot of Hennessy, they feel better. You're suffering from a mental health disorder. That mental health disorder could be an eating disorder. It could be an addiction. It's so many things. And the reality is that all the time you don't need medicines. You don't need psychotropic medications. Therapy, cognitive behavioral therapy, all of those things will help you. But you have to be ready, and you have to understand where you are to accept the help and to even ask for help. So what we want you to know is that we want you to understand what mental health is, what mental illness is, what mental illness isn't, and how to deal with people that have mental illness, okay? Remember this. Contrary to popular opinion, mental illness is not the result of inadequate parenting. And I think that's something that we got to stop blaming on parents. You ain't make your child mentally ill. Stupidity and mental illness are two different things, really. Mental illness, when we talk about behavior modification, which is a lot of the things that you would do with a child who's exhibiting, some behaviors, that doesn't necessarily work for individuals with mental illness. And people that are determined to get better, that have mental illness, are not going to get better without support. Okay, mental illness, schizophrenia, bipolar, major depression, OCD, panic disorders, all of those things are organic brain diseases, okay? I really need you to understand that, because the thing is, we've gotten to the point where we sincerely feel like mental health disorders are a result of something that happened with parenting. No, it's not inadequate parenting. Now, if your parent, in fact, had a mental health disorder, that could be something else, okay? That could be something else. But what we want to make sure, we just really want to make sure that you know what the mental health disorders are. You know what some of the signs or symptoms of those disorders are. And also, just to really let you know that we're here for you, okay? M.B.G is here to help you understand and decipher whether or not you're dealing with a mental health disorder. And like Amber J said, we're not here to diagnose, but we do have a little bit of expertise in the area of mental health and psychology and things of that nature, and we definitely want to help you, okay? Mental illness is not a crime, and we need you to understand that there are so many people in the prison system, you know, in the criminal justice system who are mentally ill, okay? And I just don't know why we can't help them. I don't know why. What we have to do is we have to make sure that we are supporting these individuals with mental illness, and we are helping them to maintain their functionality in the community. Because check this out. At the end of the day, we are all human, and we are all suffering from something that could be considered a sign or symptom of mental illness. And see, that's the other thing. We got to make sure that we address this, because what happens is the signs and symptoms of mental illness are signs and symptoms of, you know, simple things. Okay, you break up with your boyfriend, or you're going through a divorce, you feel sad, you know, you're worried, you're guilty, you're going to have some, you know, extreme highs and lows. But we have to define acute and chronic. See, an acute situation would be like in a common cold. A cold is acute because it's quick. But chronic bronchitis is something different, because bronchitis may, you know, you'll have that all year long. And so those are the different things that we need to make sure that we're kind of focusing in on. Okay, I worry that we might not be taking signs and symptoms serious enough. I don't know. I really don't know. But I think that with this segment, Sip Tea with M.B.G. in January of 2018, guys, we want to talk about some real stuff, okay? We want you to know that people with mental illnesses may be more vulnerable to crime, abuse, or injury. Because, see, everybody has this assumption that people with mental illness are crazy and they going to kill us. But guess what? People with mental illness are more apt to hurt themselves because they're confused and they're scared. Stop being so fearful of people with mental illness and try to help. I mean, we have to do something. I don't understand how we can live in a society where more than 5 million people are suffering every year from an acute episode of mental illness. But nobody's talking about it. See, because that's the thing. We only see the people that have chronic mental illness that commit crimes and do all types of craziness. We don't talk about our own sufferings with mental illness. We don't talk about how we went into a state of depression because we lost our job, how we went into a state of depression because we lost our parent or we lost a child. Those are acute episodes of mental illness if you exhibit any of those signs and symptoms, okay? But the reality is that if you continue to have acute episodes of mental illness and they're left untreated, these disorders of the brain start to disrupt your ability to think sufficiently. Okay? Your brain sufficiency, efficiency, effectiveness is just ridiculous. It's ridiculous. What I need you to understand is that we're in a time where everybody wants to understand everything, but we don't want to take the steps to truly understand what's going on. And that's a problem. That's a problem. What I'm thinking is that what we would like from you guys who are listening, we need for you to take a step back. Think about some of the signs and symptoms of mental illness, suicidal thinking, major changes in eating habits, inability to cope with, daily problems and stress, extreme tiredness, or you can't sleep enough. Those are the things that you really, really, really need to think about. Now, notice that I said that mental illness is not a significant indicator that one had inadequate parenting. But mental illnesses are thought to be caused by genetic and environmental factors, okay? So that could be anything from inherited traits to environmental exposures before birth and brain chemistry. Because the thing is, genetics, that's why we talked in 2017, we talked about the importance of, knowing your family history, because at the end of the day, somebody in that family had a mental health disorder that was undiagnosed, and there's a reason why now you have a child with a mental health disorder. And you're trying to figure out why, because somewhere down the line, some parent, aunt, uncle, grandparent didn't tell you what was really going on within their household, okay? There are risk factors, for these mental illnesses, and I think that as we're introducing this segment, we need to talk about those. Traumatic experience. If you've been assaulted, military combat, those traumatic experiences can put you at risk for developing mental health problems. If you have a blood relative, once again, a parent or a sibling, stressful situation, let me tell you something. People be talking about people committing suicide due to finances. Let me tell you one thing. That is on paper as a risk factor for mental illness. I bet you didn't know that diabetes and things, ongoing medical conditions can cause forms of mental illness. Guys, it's so much. It's so much. And I think that what we have to do at this point is we really have to talk about this, and we really have to make sure that you understand mental illness is real. Mental illness is real, and at the end of the day, we need to make sure that we're doing everything we can to inform and educate you on mental health awareness, let you know that it's okay. Mental illness is common. About 1 in 5 adults has a mental illness in any given year. Mental illness can be acute, which is quick, or it can be chronic. Mental illness is also the leading cause of disability, okay? And if it goes untreated, it can cause severe emotional, behavioral, and physical health problems. So I need you to understand this. But, guys, guess what? I'm your girl, Lily Mae. This is Sippin' Tea with M.B.G. Happy New Year. This is the January 2018 segment, and this segment is called Brain Buster 101, and we're going to address mental health disorders all month long. So please, please, please tune in next week. 12 noon. And remember, this is Sippin' Tea with M.B.G. M.B.G. listens, and then we speak. Have a great day.